Hello there! 2 years ago I made a video where I criticized urbanist content on YouTube. Can you believe it's been 2 years? That video had been on my mind for a while, and with some free time between my usual multi-hour gaming reviews, I went for it. I don't need to relitigate the whole reason why I made the original video, but let's recap. As a passionate Colorado Springs fanboy who's lived here most of my life, starting a decade ago, I really wanted to get involved in some productive way to make this the best city in the world. I mean, in my heart, it already was, but it absolutely has opportunities for improvement. I'd been getting involved with local politics before COVID, but under lockdown, I became orange-pilled thanks to Not Just Bikes and a whole bunch of other YouTube creators making urbanist content. Learning so much so quickly about urban design and planning and how cities should look and function ideally as a built environment kept me busy. They gave me a lot to think about, especially around here, as I'd walk our sidewalks and ride by bus or car. But eventually I noticed a big problem with that genre of content. Whether the creators were big or small, they could describe lots of common problems with modern North American city design, like stroads and induced demand. And some could even enlist specific examples from where they lived, but few could actually articulate what to actually do with that knowledge. And that was really frustrating because I was familiar with that next step. Being a passionate urbanist or transit advocate doesn't mean much if you don't talk to the actual people who are responsible for them where you live. And I know firsthand that it didn't really require that much effort to start. The fact that so many of those urbanist creators never talked about it or even mentioned the process of how these things happened where they lived meant that they weren't figuring it out themselves. Instead, they were just regurgitating the same dozen talking points over and over again, pointing at a nearby stroad where they live and saying, "Car's bad," and scribbling on top of Google Earth footage for content. So I explained that problem in video form just like this, uploaded it to my gaming channel, and I didn't even alert my subscribers when I posted it because I didn't want it to mess up my channel with the algorithm or whatever. But then it blew up. City Nerd even did a reaction video, which I watched live with my future fiance, and my heart was pounding out of my chest the whole time. Shout out to Philip Malice, who also did a reaction video. It wasn't just that my complaint went a bit viral and got lots of views, it's that so many people who watched it agreed with it. So many people said that they were activated to make their cities better places to live by urbanist YouTube content like Not Just Bikes, but then didn't know what to do with that passion because literally no one was telling them what to do with it. And yet, despite the overwhelmingly positive reaction, there were people who weren't as enthusiastic about my critique. Some people said, "Oh, YouTube is just for entertainment, not for activism," and that's just a completely bullshit thing to believe. Others said, "Well, you were activated by the existing content you're talking about, you're complaining about, so it seems like that's all we really need," which was a call to an action, basically. Yes, it's true. People did get orange-pilled and then start interacting with their city or county governments. But like I said, I was already leaning into local politics when I started watching Not Just Bikes and the Urbanity. They just helped build the language I needed to advocate for these specific things. People like me are the edge case. We'd get so much more done if we started attacking the opportunity space within. The thing is, despite how big it got, I knew that a single video wasn't going to change the whole urbanist YouTube subgenre or meta. I then decided to put my money where my mouth was and start a second channel called Nth City, where I did just that. Thanks to a pinned comment on my original video, I was able to get nearly 1,000 subscribers before I released a single piece of content. I interviewed local leadership as well as urban leaders from around the country who reached out to me because they had seen my critique for a whole series of explainers designed to do exactly what I complained about, rather than just cash in on YouTube drama and bounce. I immediately drafted outlines for 4 episodes of Nth City based on those interviews. One of those interviewees has now moved up to become the elected mayor of Westminster, Colorado since I recorded it. I produced the first episode, an explainer on city governments, and released it to the world with the thought that it might do well considering my original video was still incredibly popular. But in that first month after release, my original YouTube video had gained another 30,000 views, while my first episode of Nth City had summoned not even 1,300. At that point, I'd put my gaming channel on hold for months. And it was a thing that was still bringing in a little bit of money while I was still unemployed and between layoffs. I came to the unfortunate conclusion that I had to shelve all of this urbanist content I was passionate about bringing to the world. No one was watching it, and if I continued working on it, the chances of that changing still weren't great, like building any YouTube channel from basically scratch. Despite the occasional comment cheerleading me to continue, that was basically the end of Nth City. Actually, when a flagpole annexation came on the ballot locally that I was opposed to, I made a video about that became very useful for Springs voters. It was fun to see the algorithm send it to people across the country who wished us well. And we did well, actually, defeating the annexation with 82% of the vote. And then for over a year, nothing. I went on making gaming reviews, looking back occasionally on the pot that had been stirred, and then this guy reached out to me on the Nth Review Facebook page, which is actually a thing, to tell me his story about becoming a passionate urbanist. It was from
Harrison Kesling.
Harrison hails from Morrisville, North Carolina, right in the dead center of the Research Triangle area of Raleigh, Durham, and Cary. He's an engineer with an analytical mind, a true problem solver. He sees big problems and has fun piecing together the solutions.
I got to college and then, my mom's calling. It's like, hey, refrigerator's broken. Can you fix it? It's like, I can tell you how it's supposed to work.
After graduating from college, he landed a nice job and got to spend a week in Europe. There, he experienced true urban walkability.
I was in Rome for a week. That was great. Walked 54 miles, didn't gain a single pound, despite all the pasta and pizza that I ate.
He came back to the States and became interested in transit solutions here. He'd already been orange-pilled by Not Just Bikes content, like myself and so many others. So when he landed another job in downtown Raleigh, he realized he had a bus stop nearby that could take him to work without having to drive.
I found out that I had a bus stop outside of the apartment complex. I was like, oh, that's nice. And it takes me close to where I work, but the walk was a little bit too much there. Everything that I was working towards was, what's the next smallest step that I can take to achieve the kind of lifestyle that I wanted? And essentially it was just being able to walk places.
Harrison got engaged and moved from Raleigh, the urban environment, to suburban Morrisville, so he lost his bus stop. And while he still has to drive to his bus station, he gets to reclaim that time on the bus for himself, which is a huge advantage of transit.
Going to the station adds 10 minutes, but I'd say it's worth it because I'm getting 30 minutes back, right?
So you may be asking, what's the twist, Nick? Like, what's going on? Like, why am I talking about this cool random urbanist guy from North Carolina? Well, it was in the original message that he sent to me on the Nth Review Facebook page. After watching my original video complaining about the lack of actionable steps in urbanist content, Harrison went out and got involved.
It was your video that I saw that really, I guess, made me take a big step instead of these little steps. It's a snowball effect, I feel. I mean, that's certainly the way how I've gotten to where I'm at now. If there are certain things that you think are missing in your life, in your community, make it happen. Start building those relationships. You start building that community. You'll start having those conversations. You'll start to make a difference. And then it'll just snowball from there.
He began to piece together what makes his city special, what its composition is, how it works administratively. He began to understand the bureaucracies that emerge naturally from local governments and the lack of, coordination between municipalities and those governing bodies.
I gave a council comment. Best practice, be nice. Tell the council what you like about your town, because when discussions are coming up to, hey, we got to cut stuff. Hey, I really like that public art installation. Hey, I really like that community garden that we have. Hey, I really like the bike lanes. It helps get me to work on time. That'll stick in their mind, and they'll like, oh, I remember people like that. And it's the same way if it's a negative comment, right? If one person's coming to give a comment about that, you got to think there's like 20 other people that feel the exact same way. I gave my comment, something transit related, and my district representative, she came down off the dais once there was a break, and she came and she introduced herself to me, and we ended up sitting down for coffee. And at that time, right, I'm just talking about my lived experience. If we're going to have a transit system, here's how I draw it, right? Here's how I do it. Spoiler alert, how I drew it is not at all how it's being thought about, now as we're getting into the study. So
he found allies for his vision of a new Morrisville both inside and outside the government, and then he decided to run for office.
It's funny that your video that you had, it ends with, or you could run for office, and then it just cuts to black. It's like, I think I might. My pitch basically was, imagine walking down a calm, tree-lined street to your local park or cafe, greeting your neighbors along the way. We want to reduce our traffic congestion, reduce our carbon emissions, strengthen our community. We've got to design for people, pedestrians, walkability. Hope it's convinced you to come out and vote for me in the upcoming election.
And in this past November, he won. Now he gets to help shape the future of his city for the better. So it's been 2 years since my video, and a lot of things are still the same. Not Just Bikes is still a snarky doomer about North America. It seems to work for him because he's an entertainer. It's made him very popular. I've seen more than a few promos for his recent Nebula series. He gets featured as the default urbanist voice in video essays. He's there to be your urbanist critic. But the biggest problem I've seen with those claiming to be urbanists who rely almost exclusively on his bitch and moan diet is that they become this group of people who have nihilistic views on reform because of his views, because of what he preaches. He doesn't see a solution as possible, so why not understand the problem pretty well and then do nothing? Car centricity and dependency is a problem that's barely a century old. We can work around it if we start working together instead of just rage-baiting randos on the internet for clicks and subscribes. The goal of my original video was to point people toward turning their new urbanist fantasies that they watched on their screens into something that was actually happening in their neighborhoods without relying on a certain nonprofit. People to this day still comment that you can't make effective urbanist content on YouTube because every city is unique, and it's like, yeah, of course every city is unique. The point is, there's still a layer of opportunity even from my single Nth City video that can inspire people to start looking for the right things and start running in the right direction to help make their city a better place too. There are lessons that I can learn from Boston or Milwaukee or Laramie right here in Colorado Springs. If every city had an urbanist content creator keeping people up to date on what their local government was doing and translating it for people who don't have the time to understand it, especially locals, you could be a superhero. There's no pile of YouTube content that can reverse car centricity and the culture that surrounds it. That takes real leadership and plenty of time steering the ship in the right direction. It requires going outdoors like this, finding peers where you live, attending meetings, reading plans, and so much more. It requires work. And look, maybe you don't need to run for local office, but you can support someone who is. Or you can start the conversation that creates that bench of candidates. And you should always vote, no matter how uninteresting the ballot looks. There are few things more exciting than personally knowing at least one person in nearly every race on my local ballot when it shows up in my mailbox. You just need to start figuring out what your city means to you and how it works. That's how you'll start making it better.
It can be hard in suburban communities, especially when we're isolated, finding those other people that care about these things. You know, you start showing up at town council meetings and you hear what, other people are saying, and, you introduce yourself, you say, hey, I liked your comment about, this issue. I'm meeting someone on the bus, and, we're developing a relationship. One of the things that I think people need to realize is that feeling of discomfort of being with people, being a part of a community, it's coming from these land use decisions, right? It's important to realize that this is not how we were supposed to live. We're supposed to live in the community, not in a cul-de-sac.